for a lot of entrepreneurs reaching out to investors on the equity side, they may hear hundreds of no's. Some of the most famous entrepreneurs in the history of our country, folks like Jeff Bezos and others, heard hundreds of no's before they got his first investment in Amazon. So again, I think you have to have a really tough skin. I love being an entrepreneur. It's the greatest decision I've ever made. But the reality is it's work. And I tell entrepreneurs all the time, you have to be willing to work harder than anybody else to end up more financially successful than anybody else.
Welcome to the Throne of Wealth, the podcast that empowers you to reign over your financial future. Each episode brings you tax strategies, wealth building insights, and stories from inspiring entrepreneurs. The Throne of Wealth is brought to you by King of Kings Accounting Firm, where financial challenges become opportunities for growth. Let's get into it.
Hi, welcome back to one of our episodes again. And today we are talking with Scott Kelly, CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners, a business accelerator that provides a startup access to over 13,000 investors and 40,000 business partners. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Karen. Appreciate it.
I'm so honored to have you here today. And like I stated off the podcast, off recording, that I am so excited and thrilled to learn more about what you do, your background, and, how you help investors and partner up with business partners throughout, the States. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Scott.
Sure. I'll share a little bit of background. I've been in the deal business for over 30 years. I started working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in the early 80s. I moved to San Francisco in 86, worked as an investment banker, taking tech companies public on the stock exchange, and then did that until 93. 93, I became a founder for the first time. And then from 93 to 2000, I founded and exited 3 of my own companies. So I started out as a founder and had successful exits 3 times during that time period, and moved to Arizona. Set up another business that was completely unrelated to what I was doing before, and sold that 6 years later. And then I started Black Dog Venture Partners. And basically what we were doing, Karen, was we provide opportunities for entrepreneurs to get in front of investors, help them scale, grow, and exit their business. And we've been successful at doing that for hundreds of companies. We've helped these companies raise $5 billion. Approximately 30 of them have exited since we began Black Dog. Like as you mentioned, we built an investor network of 13,000 investors that we've done deals with, and 40,000 others that get our newsletters. In addition to that, we run VC Fast Pitch, which is our online and in-person pitch event where entrepreneurs get to pitch for 5 minutes to investors, and we've raised about $130 million for entrepreneurs through that. So, and that's just a little bit of background on me.
Wow, this is amazing. It's fascinating. What have you built, a massive network of investors and partners in bringing small business owners to have, that step up that we all need in business. So you have been the bridge from, when we kind of hit bottom and we need capital for us to take it to the next level. This is amazing. This is fascinating. So Scott, tell me a little bit about who will be an ideal business owner that will, investors will be attracted to invest in their business.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, honestly, what I try to do mostly is match the right entrepreneur with the right investor. And I think that's the key for the folks listening in is that, my specialty is primarily technology and software companies, but we have investors that invest in all kinds of businesses at all kinds of stages of growth. And so I would tell you, for those listening in, the first thing is to find the right investor. And what I mean by that, make sure they are an investor that has experience investing in your industry, and they have the ability and the risk tolerance to invest at your stage. Because some companies we work with are generating revenue and they're profitable, and so that they will reach out to one type of investor. And there's others listening today that just have a great idea but don't have any business yet or any sales yet. And so you could have to match those investors with the entrepreneurs, and that's a lot of what we do.
Wow. But many entrepreneurs struggle with a pitching, with the presentation of that idea. So what would be some suggestions there, Scott?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. And for anyone listening, if you send me an email and I'll give you that contact later, we have a
Hmm.
whole startup toolkit that we send out free to everybody, which includes a number of resources, pitch decks, information on how to find and pitch
Mm-hmm.
investors for your startup, and all kinds of information that you need. But I think the first, best step is to one, really understand and be okay with the fact that you may need to raise money. And honestly, I tell everybody the best way to raise capital is go sell your product or service. Start with that first. And then there's, raising equity capital is one option. You can get loans, you can get grants, there's other
Hmm.
resources out there. But once you do decide to raise equity capital or bring in owners to your business, then you've got to do some homework. One, you've got to build an effective list of potential investors that are specific to your industry and your stage of business. And that does take time to build. And then you need to build the tools necessary to present to investors. That starts off with a pitch deck. And then you need to have due diligence items like your bios and your financials and other items that obviously, firms like you can provide.
Hmm.
But you have to have the right people to talk to, and you have to have the right information for those investors to make a smart decision.
So Scott, a scenario came to mind of one of our, clients that was doing some negotiation with some investors. He forwarded me an email, someone that was in on a different state, and was proposing to invest in his business. Um, what are those risks, or what should they be looking out? Because some of these can also be a scam. So the email that he got, it was like, we're gonna invest in your business. You're gonna have to send proof of bank accounts and funds, and we will make the transfer via crypto coin.
Yeah,
Ah.
you got to be really careful about that, and that's where the research begins.
Mm.
I think the reality is if you get an unsolicited email from someone with an offer like that, do your homework. Ask
Mm-hmm.
for references. Look for them online, and use various websites like Crunchbase or PitchBook or even LinkedIn to learn more about them.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is you can avoid those things if you do your homework ahead of time. As I mentioned, do research the investors that you're going to pursue. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because what you don't want to do is you don't want to waste your time and take that risk, with an investor. And the investor doesn't want to waste their time if you're not the appropriate type of company for them, based on your stage and your industry. So really, again, it really comes down to doing your homework. And honestly, investors need to do due diligence on the entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs also need to do due diligence on the investors.
Wow, this is fascinating. So, Scott, for those companies that are actually looking and doing their homework and doing their research, what would be some key elements that they will need to have? We know that, as you mentioned, right, like the compliance and their financials, but what will be some of those key elements that investors will evaluate and will be kind of like a deal breaker for them to
Right.
invest in that company? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of companies and a lot of investors, use what's called a pitch deck to put your
Mm.
opportunity in front of investors. And I think you need to have what I think a lot of times you have to have a good story and a good pitch deck. And what the pitch deck does is, answers a few important questions for the investor. One, what's the problem you're trying to solve and why is it a problem worth solving? What is your solution to that problem? And why is it the best solution? Is it cheaper, faster, or does it
Mm.
have some other qualities? Secondly, next, the investors want to know who's on your team and why are they most qualified to execute.
Mm.
Um, they want to know about your go-to-market, how you're going to sell your product, and how you're going to make money at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And then they want to know that you've done some homework about your competition. And then finally, if you're asking for X amount of money, let's say you wanted to raise $500,000, you should have a very clear idea of what you're going to spend that money on and what you hope to accomplish once you get that investment. So those are some of the key elements in a pitch deck. And,
Mm.
even in a conversation, you should have those answers, somewhat ready when you're talking to an investor.
Yeah, yeah. So is there any years of experience in that particular field required to have certain investors, or an idea can be just, from the
No, there's,
startup point?
well, obviously it's important, I think, and the reality is, if I tell most entrepreneurs, you have to understand what skills you have,
Mm,
but you also have to
mhm,
understand what skills you don't have. I work with a lot of technical founders that are good programmers and good developers, but they
mhm.
don't have accounting skills or legal skills or marketing skills.
Yeah.
If you don't have those skills, find people on your team that
Mhm,
do. And that's, I think, really critical. So you don't
mhm,
necessarily need any kind of college degree or experience to become an
mhm.
entrepreneur. That's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. Anyone can
Yeah.
do it. Um, but you have to have an adequate team to really complement your strengths and overcome your weaknesses.
Wow, wow. Scott, beyond funding, you provide sales, marketing, and coaching, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the reality is, I've trained 1,000 salespeople in my career. In addition to the capital we raised, we've helped companies, generate hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. And I think it's important, especially, we learned that when we're working with early stage companies, they may want funding, but the most
Mhm.
important thing might be generating sales.
Yeah.
And so, we work with our partners on helping them create new sales channels, new distribution opportunities. I have a company that we just began work with, and they're in the boating industry. And I made a phone call to an associate I know and got their product into 225 marinas. And so
Wow.
those are the things that I think we are value added, because I think what that does when you're raising capital, it does two things. One, it makes it easier to raise capital because you can demonstrate that you have traction for investors. And secondly, the other thing it does is reduce the possible need for capital because you're generating sales.
Mhm.
So we provide a lot of those things, and yeah, it's just because I've been, I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for a while, so I have some contacts and I have some experience, and I
You,
share that with the companies that we work with.
you have that experience of that not to do and that to do.
Exactly,
And the
exactly,
do's and the nots and the don'ts, right?
absolutely,
Yeah, as you were mentioning, as business owners and entrepreneurs, anyone can do it. However, if we're not structured, it's one of those things that we get funding, but instead of advancing, we're now in debt because we're not having the right sales, we don't have the right brand, not attracting the right customer, not promoting, and obviously overspending in operations. So we have a series of other problems that we're creating by not having the right guidance.
absolutely.
Um, one of the other questions that I have here, Scott, is because I'm thinking right now certain clients that have come to mind as you were speaking that when it comes to looking for investors, it's having those key indicators and having clarity on the vision, right? A lot of the times we speak so much about having clarity of the idea and how the idea is unique to us, but most of the time someone else already thought that idea and either they implement or they're in the process of it. Doesn't mean that it is a bad idea,
Right.
uh, but but what I'm trying to get to is like when you have a baby, you think your baby is the most beautiful one, right? I'm a mother. I love my kids, and so to me, they're my world, and I think my babies are the most beautiful and gorgeous children in the world. But that's how we treat our business a lot of the times, and we don't identify those key indicators that will put us at risk or that will be deal breaker when we're trying to attract the right investors. So apart from having our vision clear, our clarity on that, what are we going to invest, what do we need the money for, and what are we trying to do, what will you be something else you can elaborate a bit more about our product when it comes to our marketing? Who are we trying to attract?
So obviously, when you're marketing to investors, it's like
Mhm,
any kind of sales. It's a lot of work. It's a lot
mhm,
of phone calls. It's a lot of no's. But the main thing is you have to, like you said, this might be, this is your baby, so you think it's beautiful, but you're talking to people that talk to hundreds of people a month that thinks their baby is the most beautiful baby. And so you have to really understand and talk to the investor with the things that are important to them, not necessarily the important things to you.
Got it. Yeah.
And the two most important things to investors are the return on their capital and the return of their capital. And you have to talk to them from that perspective, because quite honestly, depending on the investor, venture capital firms on the later stage, probably have 8 out of their 10 companies go to absolute zero. So they have to count on a couple of home runs to really be effective. And even with early stage investors like angels and high net worth individuals, this is a high risk business. These are illiquid companies. Small businesses have a high failure rate. So you need to give them confidence that you can get their money back and then also get them return on their capital. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, once they, this is like taking that pretty baby and taking them to, a talent show or a beauty show, you're already impressed. You have to impress the judges.
Oh, wow. Yes, that I was kind of picturing the scenario, but Scott, from a two different side perspective, what would be one of the ones that you say has been a success story, and one of a story that hasn't been as successful?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate to have a number of very successful stories in my career. And, many years ago, I had 2 entrepreneurs pitch at one of my events in Phoenix, Arizona. There were 2 brand new entrepreneurs, new startups. They came to my event. They actually pitched for 1 minute to investors. During the lunch break, one of the investors invited them to go visit them at his offices in California. And at that office, that meeting, he invested $270,000 in the company. A couple of years later, he invested $3 million in the company. The company sold a few years after that for 9 figures. And now those 2 entrepreneurs run one of the top venture capital firms in the country. So they went from entrepreneur looking for investments to an investor making investments. So I was very proud of that.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we've had some good stories. And honestly, my business, a lot of them don't succeed. It's just the nature of the beast, and I think the biggest challenge that, we have, especially when companies are raising capital, is they have to be prepared and they have to have a tough skin. I think what happens is, for a lot of entrepreneurs reaching out to investors on the equity side, they may hear hundreds of no's. Some of the most famous entrepreneurs in the history of our country, folks like Jeff Bezos and others, heard hundreds of no's before they got his first investment in Amazon. So again, I think you have to have a really tough skin, and that's where it really becomes, and I love being an entrepreneur. It's the greatest decision I've ever made, but the reality is it's work. And I tell entrepreneurs all the time, you have to be willing to work harder than anybody else to end up more financially successful than anybody else.
What are some of the conditions when investing in a company, Scott, that investors kind of set in place or require once they make an investment?
Yeah, I think it's depending on the investor. I think it's always important to keep investors informed of what you're doing. So a lot of investors will have monthly calls or updates. I think it's very important to update your investors because, if you don't update them, they're not going to know what's going on. Yeah. And you should be willing to tell them the good news and the bad news along the way. Number one, I think it's also important that you continue to be proactive in growing the company. And then ask them for their advice. You want to find an investor that is involved in your company that not only provides capital, but might provide connections or other resources to help your business succeed and help his investment be more profitable.
Yeah, most definitely for sure. Have you seen, well, I'm pretty sure you probably have, now that let me rephrase this question. Entrepreneurs that probably got an investor to invest in their business, but they weren't successful and were able to repay back.
Yes, I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most famous stories I told. I used to teach entrepreneurship at the university level, and I told everyone the story about a company called Juicerio. This was a company that several decades ago had a juicer that made juice in 3 minutes using an app, and they raised $120 million for
Mm.
this company. What they did is they posted their juicer app on YouTube, where it made juice in 3 minutes, but it cost $700 to $2,400, and I bet you can guess what happened. Someone else took their $100 blender and made juice in 60 seconds. So
Oh,
they didn't solve a problem. And so after raising $120 million, they lost all the money, went bankrupt in under 2 years.
wow. Wow. Yeah, that was a hard one to
That's an
recover.
example of not
Yeah,
solving a real problem.
yeah, yeah. So we gotta make sure that we're actually solving a real problem. Yes. Wow. That was a hard one to, yes, that's a hard one to recover. Yeah.
That's right.
What would be some of those financial advices that you would give entrepreneurs, Scott, for those that are advanced in their business and for those that are probably in the startup point that, they're looking for investors or probably soon to look for investors to invest in their business?
hmm Well, obviously, they need to know their business, they need to know their
Mm,
market, they need to know their competition, and they need to know their numbers.
mm,
I think it's important, and obviously, having a professional like yourself who
mm,
understands how to put together their financial statements, today, and also putting together their pro forma financial statements with the
mhm.
proper projections. So I think those are critical things, and these are the core, attributes of a successful business, regardless of what if you're raising capital. But these are the things that investors are going to want to see, and entrepreneurs need to be able to make available.
Wow. Scott, how can the audience, and everyone listening get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, like I said, you send me an email to scott@blackdogvp.com. And if you put startup tools in the subject line, I'll send a free link to all kinds of tools with pitch deck templates and all kinds of resources for startups raising capital. You can reach me online. My websites are blackdogventurepartners.com. If you'd like an opportunity to pitch to potential investors, it's vcfastpitch.com. And then you can find me on all social media channels using the tag Black Dog CEO.
Beautiful. So for all of those listeners out there that, they have their business, they have an idea that they were ready to do this process, the next phase of growth, and present your idea, your business to the investors. Reach out to Scott. Scott, it's amazing to see how many investors you have connected throughout the years and business owners and businesses that have benefit from this and continue to grow and strive, and not only just connecting them to get funding and to get to the next phase in their business, but also providing more key essential tools. I will say some of the most important tools in our businesses, which is sales and marketing, and definitely coaching, because the mentality. I always say that the mentality that served us yesterday will not serve us tomorrow. So there's always room for growth. There's always room for connections and for new things. And especially if we're entrepreneurs, we cannot afford not to learn something new and have a new connection. Any piece of advice that you want to leave the audience with, Scott, before we disconnect?
I would tell you the three things I tell you everybody, every entrepreneur: keep learning, keep
Mm,
growing, and don't give up.
that's right. Keep learning, keep growing, and don't give up. Yes, nobody talks about that, the hard moments.
Exactly.
Nobody talks about when we are rock bottom and we're like, I tell myself in the mirror every day, leaders don't lead, Karen, with procrastination, with fear. Come on, you gotta do this. Let's face this another day.
Yeah.
Here we go again. Yes, we got to keep going. Thank you so much, Kat. It has been such an honor and a pleasure for you to, join our podcast today. I hope that we can have you in the near future for you to speak more about this topic. I'm pretty sure many of our listeners will benefit from this. And for all of those that still don't have the way to connect you, can you repeat one more time the email and the subject line?
Sure. You can send me an email to scott@blackdogvp.com and put startup tools in the subject line.
Thank you, Scott. Has been such an honor.
My pleasure. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks for listening to The Throne of Wealth. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review to help others find the show. A special thanks to our sponsor, King of Kings Accounting Firm, dedicated to helping you build and protect wealth for generations. Until next time, take the reins of your financial future and lead with confidence.